How you guys doing today? This is Low IQ Media here. And you can see I've been collecting pretty heavy during the pandemic, and in fact this is only half of it. I've had to box up about at least this much and more from what I've collected during the pandemic. So I'm going to be showing you guys a couple of movies today that I've watched. One of them I've watched recently for the first time, and one I've watched a couple years ago for the first time. But I will start off by talking about Greenland. I don't know if you guys have seen Greenland tonight. You've seen Greenland yet, but I found something a little bit funny about the movie. It's a pretty decent disaster movie. It's not that bad. But I thought something was kind of funny in it. Essentially, if you haven't seen it, the movie centers around a family who has been selected to enter essentially a fallout shelter. There's a comet that's passing by the Earth, and it's passing very close to the Earth, so some of the comet fragments from the tail are striking the Earth, and they essentially find out that there's a very large fragment. I think in the movie it says it's 9 miles in diameter, and supposedly it's larger than the one that theoretically killed the dinosaurs. But essentially this family has been selected to enter this fallout shelter in Greenland. And they make their way to the military base to get loaded onto the military transport plane to go to Greenland. And when they get there, they're giving these ID bands to put around their wrist. And they essentially, because the kid is diabetic, they get kicked off the flight, and they get separated. So the adventure kind of begins of them trying to get to north, and the wife is trying to get to her father's house, which is very close to where I live in Lexington, Kentucky. And they essentially, there's a lot of kind of the premise, or there's a lot put on these wristbands, and people keep trying to steal them. And at one point, the father actually ends up killing the guy because he's trying to steal his wristband. So there's a lot of emphasis put on the wristband, and then they make it to the end. They finally, at the end, they make it up to Canada, get on a regular plane with some people they met earlier in the movie, and they get to Greenland, and there's no resistance. They end up crash landing, and then they walk to they're pretty close to where the military installation is, the fallout shelter. And they end up walking to there, and the military just picks them up, and they're all allowed to go into the fallout shelter. They didn't check the wristbands after they got there. So there's no payoff for the wristbands at all. So basically, a large part of the plot in the movie is these wristbands are such a big deal. People are trying to steal them so they can try to steal their ID to get on one of these planes, and there's no resistance at all at the end for it. And in reality, if they were able to make it to Greenland in the fashion they did, I would say there would be compassion on the part of the soldiers just to let them in. I think that's probably realistic, but I just think there was very little payoff for this plot point. It's really as they like to say, a MacGuffin. The wristbands are MacGuffins in the story. But other than that, the movie wasn't too bad. It's fun to watch. It's a fun little disaster movie. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a better made Dante's Peak. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dante's Peak. I think it came out in 1996. It came out in the mid to late 90s. But yeah, it's probably worth checking out since there's not very much coming out right now. And since Wonder Woman apparently was a disaster, I haven't got to watch it yet. I'm planning on watching it. I don't have HBO Max yet. Don't have really any rush to get it. I kind of want to watch the Snyder Cut. That's about the only thing I'm looking forward to about HBO Max at this point. And except they're going to be releasing a lot of movies there. I think Warner Brothers are going to release their whole lineup on HBO Max, so that's interesting. There might be a couple movies I want to watch there. But what are you guys' thoughts on Greenland? If you've seen it, it's fun, but it's got its problems. But the movie I wanted to talk about this week is a Humphrey Bogart movie. And the reason I wanted to talk about it, and it's about a week late now, is it's a Christmas movie, essentially. But the name of this movie is We're No Angels. This movie has Humphrey Bogart, Aldo Ray, and Peter Ustinov, and also Basil Rathbone's in it. Let's see, Joan Bennett and Gloria Talbot. And I'm bad with names, so that's why I'm reading from my tablet here. But essentially, what's going on in here, this movie takes place on Devil's Island. And basically, the characters' names are Joseph, Albert, and Jules. That's Humphrey Bogart, Aldo Ray, and Peter Ustinov. They're three escaped convicts from the prison on Devil's Island. And they're trying to figure out how they can get on the boat to leave and go back to Paris. And so they end up going into a local shop and kind of befriending the shop owner, which is played by, I think the shop owner is played by, Leo G. Carroll. And the shop owner essentially needs some repair work done around the shop, and their roof is leaking, so they're like, well, we can repair the roof. And they go on the roof and discuss how, well, we're going to act like we're fixing this roof. We're going to repair the roof for these people because we have experience doing this kind of work from the prison. So we're going to do this work for them, but we're also going to kind of scout out there what's going on in this shop. And we're going to hatch a plan to rob these people at nightfall. So they start watching through, there's like a window overlook of the shop from the roof of this, the way the set was made. So they're basically watching and listening to the interactions of the shop owner with customers and the shop owner with his wife and his daughter. And they kind of start interacting with the family and the shop owner, and they kind of start befriending them throughout the movie and getting to know them better by helping them solve their problems. Humphrey Bogart's character is essentially a white-collar criminal. The other two guys, they're murderers. I believe the Peter Ustinov character, he had murdered his wife or something. There's always hints to murdering his wife. And Aldo Ray, he had I can't remember, he killed somebody he had killed somebody, but he had but essentially they started hatching this plot to basically rob these people, and there's some scenes where they actually talk about maybe murdering them, but as they get to know these people, they begin to start liking them, and to the point where both parties are kind of, they kind of win each other over, and they essentially they end up getting to they invite the three criminals to have Christmas dinner with them, and while this is going on, the actual shop owner is with his nephew in the harbor in a boat because they're being quarantined for, I guess it was like malaria, and the shop owner, the actual shop owner, he is played by Basil Rathbone, who is famous for Sherlock Holmes, which we'll be getting into a Sherlock Holmes movie next. But essentially, he's in the harbor with his nephew, and the nephew had previously fallen in love with the shop proprietor's daughter, and but they eventually make their way to the shop the next morning after Christmas, or actually it's the night of Christmas. So they make it there, and he's just a complete asshole. He just wants to see the books and see if they're making money, the typical stuff. And the daughter's actually been has kind of been led on by the nephew. He has essentially, he's kind of been put in a situation where he's in an arranged marriage with another woman who's very wealthy. So he kind of doesn't want to have anything to do with her now, and she's come to terms with that. And they kind of, the three criminals kind of, they see all this happening around. They're kind of the overwatchers. They're the angels essentially, and they see all this happening, and they try to arrange the books for the shop proprietor, and they try to fix the books, and all that gets messed up. And they also have they've been carrying around this snake with them they brought from the island, which this snake was part of their escape plan to get out, and it's a poisonous snake, so they're carrying this snake around with them. So they essentially they end up basically making the Christmas dinner for the family, and they have Christmas dinner with them, and then the business owner, he comes in and is just being an asshole to everybody, and the girl finds out that the nephew is not in love with her, and so and basically everybody, they basically hate this shop owner. He's just a horrible person. It's kind of the Scrooge of the story in a certain way. And the four guys basically kill him by using the snake, and they kind of go back and forth about should we do this or not. But by the time they do it, they'd given him the basket with the snake in there, and by the time they decide, no, we better not do this, and go in to get the snake, he's already dead. So in the end, really, they decide that they're just going to go back to prison so they can do it all over again the next year. You can see that I'm horrible at telling stories, but this is how the low IQ media is going to function. I'm going to tell them the way I do, and this is how my thought process works. It's going to be all over the place, and hopefully it'll get better over time. And I'll need assistance, as you can see. But if you guys haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. It's definitely going to be a seasonal watch for me from now on. And hopefully in the future I'll just start making overlays on my videos and show you these pictures up close so you can see them. And we'll get into, I'm going to do a lot of movie reviews on older movies, and hopefully we'll do just a little bit of everything. I mean, I have a little bit of everything right here. I may even have stuff like this, you know. I have this. I haven't even opened this yet. I'm interested in getting into some of this stuff, but I'm obviously a big collector. I have 4,000 movies plus in my movie collection at this point. I've collected for a long time, but kind of choosy with the stuff that I buy. I don't go out to Dollar Trees and just buy a bunch of crap. Like good movies, and any movie might be good to somebody else, but I try to get into quality movies is what I'm looking for. And I really enjoy old movies. I'm a big fan of westerns. We'll probably talk about westerns and all varieties of movies. I'm not a huge horror fan. I don't hate horror. I love zombie movies, so I like sci-fi movies, but we'll get into stuff like that. But if you guys haven't seen...
Sorry, I don't know that. But do you like to hear a few things I can do?
No. But, moving on. Let's see here. This is the next movie I was wanting to show you guys this week. And this is a movie that I'm not sure how many people have seen this movie. Everybody's heard the name because of the band, but this movie is They Might Be Giants. And a lot of you guys may have seen this movie. I don't know. It's another excellent movie. And just so that I'm pretty up on all the character names and all the actor names. Like I'm saying, I'm horrible at names. George C. Scott's in that movie, for sure. Let's see here. Yeah, here we go. Oh, and by the way, We're No Angels is a 1955 film. We'll get into talking about directors some too, and I didn't go into any of that with that one, since it's my first one. I'm a little nervous here. Yeah, but the cast is George C. Scott, Joanne Woodward, Jack Gilford, Rue McClanahan, Al Lewis, if anybody like the Munsters, Lester Rollins, Oliver Clark. But essentially, They Might Be Giants is a Sherlock Holmes story with a little bit of a twist on it. George C. Scott character was a former lawyer, and we find out at the beginning of the movie that he's lost his wife. And he's being classified as a schizophrenic, and he's basically taking on the persona of Sherlock Holmes. He apparently was a brilliant lawyer. Sounds like he was like kind of a civil rights type of lawyer, and had done a lot of really good things in his life, but was extremely intelligent and kind of met the criteria of a Sherlock Holmes type person, but was obviously a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes because he's taken on this persona. And his basically he at the beginning of the movie, his brother is trying to get him committed so he can take over his estate and control his money. And you kind of figure out that he's done some kind of criminal activity, and he needs the money to pay off his debts. You're never sure what exactly has happened, but that's the gist of it, because he has certain people after him who end up kind of going after Sherlock Holmes too, or the George C. Scott character. And the the George C. Scott character's real name is Justin Playfair, his actual character name in it. But essentially, at the beginning, they take him to the mental hospital to have him basically analyzed or by a doctor to see if he qualifies to go in there. And you first kind of meet Joanne Woodward's character, who is Dr. Watson in the movie, and her actual last name is Watson, and you meet her analyzing a patient who essentially he can't talk. He has the ability to talk, but he's kind of lost his identity, and until they basically his identity can be figured out, he doesn't speak. So the first scene is you see there ends up being a scuffle between the kind of the head person of the hospital, who's trying to force him to come see because of money situations. Himself is essentially coming in to talk, trying to get her to leave this patient and to go analyze the Sherlock Holmes character. So, and she's like, no, I'm in the middle of a session with this person, and they end up getting into a scuffle that leads out to the hallway, and then Sherlock Holmes appears and said, leave that man alone, and he goes into how the classic Sherlock Holmes deduction, where he deduces the man's problem down and knows everything about him, and essentially gets the patient to speak. And at that point, the Dr. Watson character she basically becomes very interested in him, and so at this point on, she starts kind of following him around and becoming the Dr. Watson, and they kind of refer to her as him finally finding his Dr. Watson after this year of being in this schizophrenic state. And so she eventually becomes Dr. Watson, and it's kind of a mild love story, where you kind of slowly see her kind of falling in love with him. And it's just a fun little movie. I highly recommend it. It's great. You can understand why They Might Be Giants named themselves after this movie, and in fact, with the Google search, that is where in fact they got the name for their band, is from this movie. And it's a tremendously fun movie, especially if you like Sherlock Holmes. And it was just a coincidence that I decided to do We're No Angels and having Basil Rathbone and having his Sherlock Holmes connection with a Sherlock Holmes movie, that was completely unintentional. And yeah, I highly recommend it. I try not to spoil too much of that movie, because I would really like for you guys to see it. Essentially, Sherlock Holmes is classic. He's always looking for he's basically after Moriarty. He thinks Moriarty's after him, and the way the movie goes about it is you don't know if it's real or it's not real. You assume it's not real because he's schizophrenic. I mean, you kind of know that it's not real, but the way the movie ends, you don't know what happens. They supposedly they both end up kind of, Dr. Watson and himself end up it's kind of seeing Moriarty in the last frame, but you don't actually see Moriarty. It's just this bright light it fades to it, and it's not a fade. It's a I don't know what the correct film term for it is, but it's a whiteout effect where the light gets brighter and it whites out the screen, and that's the end of the movie. And then you have like a quote from Sherlock Holmes, I believe, at the very end. But yeah, it's a wonderful movie that everybody needs to see, especially for Sherlock Holmes fans, because it's a very unconventional Sherlock Holmes story. It takes place in 1971, obviously not in the Victorian era. Sherlock Holmes dresses as he's the actual classic Sherlock Holmes. It's pretty funny. He's walking around in more modern New York City, and his that kind of famous Sherlock Holmes hat and everything. And yeah, I love Sherlock Holmes. I don't know if anybody's seen the 1980s Sherlock Holmes, but the Sherlock Holmes of the 1980s, I have to look at my cheat sheet here. Yeah, it's George Brett and David Burke. George Brett playing Sherlock Holmes, and he's a wonderful Sherlock Holmes. It was called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. So I had a little cheat sheet for that before. I kind of remembered everything, and I'm kind of using my tablet now to do some of that, and hope you don't mind, because I'm kind of an asshole. I'm going to try to do a little bit more unconventional movie review page here. Yeah, Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman. I'm bad with names, so I've got to read them off something sometimes if I can't remember them. The new Sherlock's excellent. I think it was really well done. It's a very modern take on Sherlock Holmes, and basically placing Sherlock Holmes in a modern era is really brilliant. I really enjoyed it. But if you have seen it, comment what you guys think about it. If you liked it or disliked it. I enjoyed it myself. I like most movies I watch. I do get critical a little bit, and I thought it was a little bit silly. And Greenland, the way it kind of panned out, but I know I've went through this kind of nervously. It's my first video, so we'll start talking about different things. I don't know what I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk about some modern things, and as well, it's not going to be all old movies. My next video might be about something a little bit modern, and just actually a TV show maybe. A modern TV show. There's a couple modern TV shows I want to talk about a little bit, but not go into too much depth about them. And none of my reviews are going to be very in-depth, because that's just how I am. I'm not a slick talker like some of these guys on the internet. I love some of the shows and channels that I watch. These guys are really good about it. I just want to be a little more heartfelt about my opinion on movies and give a low IQ opinion about them. Hopefully dumb it down for a few of you guys. Well, till the next time, I will talk to you later. Thank you very much for watching.